Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to a brand new episode of Tape to Take. We have finally came up with a name and we're going with it because this podcast is about watching tape and then making that into a take. Those takes are well informed. Tape to Take. It rings off the tongue. Now, Jackson, I'm here with you. We're going to talk about the draft, but a lot of NFL free agency stuff has been happening, and your Vikings look like some early winners.
Big spenders, man. They let Kirk Cousins go, and the credit card came out. They're running that tab up, but that's what you do when you have a rookie quarterback contract. Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, Vikings GM. Ever since he came in, and I think it was 2022, I believe. He's talked about wanting to get to the point where you've got a rookie on a rookie contract, and you can just dump into all the other positions. And obviously, interior offensive line was a massive problem last season, as was interior defensive line. Those were the two biggest weak points of the Vikings team. And to get Ryan Kelly, to get Will Fries, one, they've already got chemistry, but big issue in the past last year was handling stunts with Bradbury and the revolving door at right guard, Ed Ingram at first, and they plugged in, who was it after that? Dalton Reisner. Fixed some issues, but stunts were a massive issue. You've got two guys who have been working together. There's built-in chemistry there. And then on the defensive side, there was a massive pass rush problem. They go and sign Hargrave. They go and sign Jonathan Allen, two interior defensive linemen who are not really known for their run defense, but that's fine. They're interior pass rushers. You get paid to rush the passer as a defensive lineman. And I think that push is going to be, or it's going to look a lot different this year. It's going to open things up for the edge rushers. Brian Flores always has those exotic blitz packages. It's going to be a whole different unit. I think this is the most talent that Brian Flores has had in his time in Minnesota by a country mile. Honestly, last year's defense was not that talented. They were a decently talented unit that was overperforming. Re-signing Byron Murphy was huge, and yeah, I mean, I think that the draft is wide open now for the Vikings at pick 24.
It is. They filled up the needs. They could go best player available. Omar and
Yeah.
Hampton, maybe at running back behind that offensive line. That would be very
Savon
fun.
Revel, Savon Revel, that's someone who I'm like, that would. We'll talk about him next week. We're not really doing corners today, but I've got a lot of tape to share on Revel. He is a stud.
So this week we are going to stay on offensive players, and we touched on it a little bit last episode, but this episode is going to be more about the skill position players, about the wide receivers, and we're going to start with Tet McMillan because Tet McMillan has been comped to the likes of Drake London and Mike Evans. We saw Drake London, who's a similar prototype, have success in the NFL. He just had his best season, and Tet McMillan, it feels like there is a lot of people out there are underrating him because he doesn't have that top end explosive speed, but there is still so much to like about his game.
Yeah, and that's definitely something we see. He's not a burner, and that's okay. We're gonna dive into some tape here. I've got a handful of plays here to look at to highlight what he does, but some high level stuff first here. He's kind of like he's got that Mike Evans, Drake London frame. He's a little bit lighter, but he's that big body, 6'4", fluid mover. I would even say more fluid than either Evans or London. London's a little bit debatable. Maybe early career Evans would also be debatable, but the way that he gets in and out of breaks is so smooth, and he's got this short area quickness where he's not quick per se, but when he slows down, he can move left and right, stop on a dime, cut back. We'll look at some plays like that, but I don't think he's getting credit for the way that he moves at his size. And he was talked about early in the process as the bona fide wide receiver one, but I think he's kind of become underrated. I've seen a handful of different high profile reporters putting Matthew Golden over him. Matthew Golden's a very, very talented receiver. Love his game. I think he's going to translate well, but he's not on the level of the prospect level of Tet McMillan, in my opinion. I think Tet McMillan should be the undisputed wide receiver one in this class. I don't think there's much of a debate there. And with that said, let me share screens here and we'll look at some of these plays. In terms of a wide receiver being open on a target, which separation has been something that I've seen come up a handful of times where people are kind of knocking Tet for being a separator or a separation generator. Um, when you compare him to other prospects, he falls right in line, other top receiver prospects. So on targets, Emeka Egbuka was open on 75.7% of those targets. That is elite. He was number one. Number two was Matthew Golden at 62.5%. Three was Tet McMillan at 62%. Travis Hunter was at 61.4%, and Luther Burden was at 60%. So there's no gap there. He was getting open. He was generating that separation, as we'll see in some of these clips. And on top of that, he was generating a very healthy 2.87 yards per route run, a 60% contested catch rate, which you love to see at that size. That was something that we did not see in Quentin Johnston with the Chargers a few years ago. That was something that was scrutinized on him coming out, was he did not have the contested catch profile at his size, and we saw that translate, and it has translated to this point in his career so far. So that's typically a more stable metric. If they're not catching contested targets in college, they typically won't be turning that around in the NFL. Obviously, there's some outliers there, but for the most part, it's a pretty stable metric in jumping from college to the pros. Now, another thing that I have not mentioned yet is after the catch, Tet McMillan is a load. He is again, 6'4", 220. You can see him get in this break. He's wide open, but watch when he catches this, how he can throttle this down. And this little juke right there at 6'4", like to stop and on a dime like that, shift his weight. Like that looks like a 205-pound running back juking out a safety coming down to fill a gap. And in open space, like he's not only nimble, but he's fluid with his movements. He can stop, he can cut. So right here, he catches it, he throttles it down, he turns around. You can see that this corner who's number 12 there. He falls down trying to keep up. You can see with his hands on the turf right there, trying to keep up with that stop and that cut that Tet McMillan displays there. In the open field again there, you can see that cut, another cut, like the way that this guy moves in the open field, the safety's coming down and he just completely takes that angle away from him right there. He's got some decent acceleration. It's nothing to write home about, but it's there. He didn't run at the combine. Would have loved to see that. He's probably like a 4.58, 4.60 kind of guy, and that's fine. Speed isn't a super high correlative stat for receivers. We've seen so many of the all-time great receivers run 4.6s. Larry Fitzgerald, Jerry Rice was not particularly fast. Jarvis Landry not on their level, but he comes to mind. He ran like a high 4.7s or even a 4.8.
Larry Fitzgerald, Tet McMillan talked about in a recent interview that Larry Fitzgerald is the player that he studied the most. So It makes sense. Similar body types, archetypes. So he very well is aware of what he can and cannot do.
Yeah. He's and with that frame, it adds so much value. Like he can play big where he goes up, and we'll look at that, where he's grabbing these contested balls downfield, but he's also got that juice in open space, much more than Mike Evans has after the catch. Much more than, I wouldn't say much more, but I'd say more than Drake London even has after the catch, and more than London showed at USC, more than Mike Evans showed at A&M. So again, here at the top, runs the dig. That's one thing we love about him. He's excellent on these dig routes after the catch there. It takes so many attempts here. You've got one tackler falling off him, another one just got choppy there, but another defender comes down, spins around him, cuts. Like, he's a load to take down. He's physical, so here we just see him completely run through the corner that's matched up with him in the slot. This is another thing with Tet, is you can line him up anywhere. Even though he's big and tall, you can shift him inside, similar to how the Falcons were using Drake London last year, where you move him inside, and then you've got this big 6'4" body on the inside, often getting mismatches, whether that's linebackers versus zone or whether that's smaller slot corners. So right here, he just runs right through the face of this DB there. Another one here. So here's some ball skills where we see him go up and get this. This is an NFL type catch. It's a scramble drill, so he pushes that hitch upfield, and I wish I had the end zone camera here. I didn't cut that one in, but you can see him make this sideline catch. He gets both feet down as he's making that catch. Um, the contested grab on the sideline. So NFL catch refers to getting both feet down on that sideline, which you love to see. Obviously, in college, 1 foot down is technically a grab, but that doesn't always translate to the NFL, where you need 2 feet down to secure that grab. So down here at the bottom, ball skills again. This time, number 4, sticky in coverage. He's running that post. He's right on his hip, in his hip pocket, but it doesn't matter sometimes. And that's the thing is we'll see him generate separation, but sometimes it's just shielding that corner on his shoulder and shielding him with that frame and then going up and catching it. And he's a hands catcher. He's not a body catcher. That was another thing we saw with Quentin Johnston coming out of TCU, where he would wait for the ball to get to his body. He had a higher drop rate, in large part because of that. But Tet is not that archetype of receiver. He catches with his hands through contact, and he's always going for the hand drop. He attacks the ball in the air. You love to see that at his size. So going back to that digs, right now the NFL is obsessed with dig routes. You see so many dig routes run, whether it's a backside of 3-by-1 formations where they're running like a flood concept or some type of concept to the strong side, and then you've got that second read where the quarterback's reading to the 3 side of the formation. If it's not open, he'll quickly come back left right when that dig route will be breaking to that 1 side of that 3-by-1. And Tet, the way that he uses his shoulders to shield the defender and just smoothly transitions into these digs. He does sometimes round these, but it's okay because with his frame, when he's rounding these, he's typically throwing that shoulder. Now he's got off coverage here, so we don't really see it on this play, but he uses that shoulder to create that shielding type of separation where we saw in that last play where he didn't actually have separation, but he did have the body shielding the defender. So it is a form of separation for a larger receiver. And those dig routes, man, he ran a ton of them. And he's again great after the catch as we see him there break a tackle. He was I believe he was like top 2. I think he was tied for second for receivers for most forced tackles with 29 last year. So it's something that we're gonna see in the NFL. Here's another dig route where he's running this up top. We see him just you can't keep up with him. It's just that he's not that fast, but the way he rounds there and just generates that separation after the cut. That's something you see a lot with him where he'll cut and then you see this separation go from like a small gap, a yard or two to 3-4 yards where he catches that and then he can stop on a dime and change his direction. The movement is special at his size once again. Right here, we've got a press corner. So getting off press is not a problem for him with that frame, with that strength he has. He does a great job of just kind of shifting down in the moment and dipping his shoulders and dipping left or right and getting around that press. And so right here, you'll see him take that outside release very clean. And then he cuts it back inside where now the corner can't keep up with him. And he doesn't get the target here, but you see this a lot where he beats press, the corner's inside of him and he's cutting inside, but then you'll see him clear that corner's inside leverage and steal it back. And that's something you love to see on like RPOs, quick game type route combinations that have become really popular in the NFL.
And I feel like when you look at him versus press coverage, he does a great job hand fighting. And I think that's a big part of his game. And when we talk about the rep that we just saw, the corner has inside leverage and he still beat him inside. That is something that is not supposed to happen. But he is so good at being deceptive that it does. And I feel like a big part of why I am a big fan of his game is that in his route running, there's little to no wasted movement. It's not herky-jerky. He's not trying to do too much. He gets clean in and out of his breaks, and he does not waste any movements whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah, no, he's so fluid. And here's into the sun here a little bit. It's a little glary, but he's up top. Another press that he just absolutely annihilates. This time he's taking the inside release and cuts it inside. Again, separation there. Ball doesn't go to him again. This is actually a run play. It's an RPO. So you've got that slant to the top. The offensive line is run blocking. But You'll see this a lot in the NFL, depending on the team he goes to. I would love to see him go to the Patriots. It's hard to say over Travis Hunter, but if the Patriots trade down or something, I think that he fits excellent with Drake May and his arm and what Drake wants to do, as well as what Vrabel wants to do now. I'm not sure why the sentiment has cooled down on him the way that it seems to have in draft media circles. But yeah, that's where I'm at with him.
So you think he's clearly the best wide receiver in this draft, hands down?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, like you could make the case for Travis Hunter, who we'll transition to here in a second,
Oh yeah.
but that's because the surplus of corner value that Travis Hunter provides. So let's shift to Travis Hunter. So I'll say it outright. I think that if Hunter only came out as a wide receiver, I think he'd be an early second round prospect if he had no corner abilities. I do think he's a better corner than he is a receiver, but an early second round grade for a receiver prospect is a very strong grade. He's a very good receiver. He he moves so well. He accelerates, he decelerates really well. He's got that deceptive movement. I think that there was a funny tweet recently where I think it was Kirk Benkert was saying that he's just like Justin Jefferson, and he threw the Justin Jefferson comp out right after he threw out the what was it, the who do you say? I think he said Restrepo is like a combination of Lad McConkey and Cooper Kupp, and that he'll be someone will reach in the second round. And it's like, okay, you're saying he's a combo of two elite receivers, and then that someone will reach in the second round. Like, you obviously don't believe that. Also, Restrepo's like a pure slot guy, and he's comparing them to movement.
I got a question when it pertains to Travis Hunter, because with Travis
Yeah,
Hunter, you say early second grade as a receiver.
only.
So how many receivers would you put over Travis Hunter if he was just coming out as a receiver?
Yeah. So I'd take Tet McMillan, obviously. Trey Harris is my wide receiver too. I'm very, very high on Trey Harris. I think we did the same dance a while back with AJ Brown, where AJ Brown, same school, somewhat similar physical profile, came out and went in the second round, didn't get the hype that he deserved. He played in this Ole Miss, something about these Ole Miss offenses, DK Metcalf, we saw the same thing, where these receivers just don't get the respect they deserve. I did a whole breakdown on Trey Harris in last week's episode, so go back and watch that if you want. We're not going to look too deep into his game, but he didn't get to run a ton of like complicated routes, like double breaking or like blaze out type routes. But when he did, he was phenomenal. And I cut up some of those clips where you can see him in space, throttling down and his movement, his change of direction. It's stellar. And in an offense where he's able to show that more, he's a great athlete, not the fastest guy in the world. First in yards per route run. Excellent analytical film and athletic profile. But yeah, I'd take him over Hunter. If again, this is only talking about Hunter as a receiver, so pretending that he is not also a corner. I'd take Egbuka over him, who I have as my wide receiver 3. I'd take Matthew Golden over him. I'd probably take Luther Burden over him as well. I don't think I'm disrespecting him because he's a better, like if you were just a corner, I think he's a top 12 to 15 prospect. And when you stack two of the, what I believe are top 5 valued positions, receiver and corner, and you're getting like a top 12 prospect at corner, and you're getting a top 40 prospect at receiver, that is worth so much. And I don't think he's going to play 100% of snaps on both sides. I think the sweet spot for how you deploy Travis Hunter is you try to save him on rundowns on both sides of the ball. He'll play a good amount on defense of rundowns. Maybe he plays, maybe he's a full-time starting corner in that plays. But as a receiver, like if you're in these bigger packages and you're 1st and 10, outside zone, inside zone, I don't think you need him out there for the majority of those plays. You're really trying to you have to acknowledge injury risk, and when you're playing a receiver and a corner 100% of snaps on both sides of the ball, now you're 2xing the chance that he gets hurt, and those are positions that tend to get those muscular hamstring ankles, like all kinds of soft tissue injuries. They add up, and you don't want to be exposing him to too much of that. So how I would use him is I would probably full time or close to full time on defense corner, and then in like obvious passing downs, throw him out there. If it's not an obvious passing down, I probably wouldn't be playing him too much. But I do, yeah. The Rashard Higgins thing, that I'm higher than most on Rashard Higgins. I'll get back to that, but let's get into this tape here. So this is that XL decel thing I was talking about. So the way he moves, it's so fluid. So you can see right here, he's up top. He starts with a little bit of that outside release. You got the corners, open his hips there to run with it, but then you can see how smoothly he just transitions that momentum back inside to create that separation back across the face of this corner. It looks like they're rotating it into some type of a cover 3 or fire 3 zone look, where you've got this safety down here rotating toward to play that deep middle, and then you've got this corner playing the deep third there. But the way that he crosses face there, and then as soon as he crosses that face, he accelerates and creates that separation. It's very Jordan Addison-esque. It reminds me so much of Addison's Pitt and USC tape there. He's got elite hand-eye coordination. You can see that here. This pass interference is called. It's underthrown, vastly underthrown ball by Shedeur here, but he adjusts back. DB's hand is all over his helmet there, and he's still able to come down with a catch 30, 40 yards downfield there. Ball skills again, and this is more of that kind of Jordan Addison release. Addison loves to release kind of slowly off the line. You see that the little jab steps, and then the slow build up, 3 steps upfield, and then that break inside. But he's got ball skills, and that's what really separates him from a lot of those smaller receivers, is that elite hand-eye coordination. This ball is up high. It's contested from the back with that DB driving on the ball, but he's able to come down with it. And his change of direction, again, as we've talked about, just that subtle little inside move here where he feints left with that left foot, and then he goes outside before that DB can drive on it. And he doesn't get the ball here, but you see this like all over his tape. Colorado ran so many screens, and they had Hunter running so many bullshit routes, little 5-yard hitches all the time, RPO type stuff. But when you got him out in space, you saw so much of this movement where he's almost jogging here, like upfield, and then he just goes from this jog to this sudden burst outside, where that separation becomes very, very obvious. Another thing with him, and I've got 2 clips here to showcase the same thing, but he's very aware of coverages and especially zones, and a lot of that is probably from his experience playing corner, but he knows when to he's running a dig here. He knows when to keep running, and he knows when to settle down into that soft spot. So right here, when he breaks in, you see this sweet spot between this corner and then this linebacker zone. So if he were to continue running this dig, he's going to be running himself right into the underneath zone coverage. But instead, he throttles this down and just kind of sits there. And again, doesn't get the ball at first. I think he ends up getting this. Yeah, so he gets this after Shedeur scrambles a bit. You'd love to have that ball out if you're Shedeur on that first break as he's open. This ends up being harder than it needs to be, but still a completion. And after the catch, we know he's always a threat. But here's another one where another dig route. So you've got him up top here. This time, though, rather than settling down, if he were to settle down the same way he did in that last clip, you've got this underneath zone. This is they're playing, looks like quarters, I think, and you've got this hole player here right in the middle. So instead of throttling this down, there would be a lot less space between these 2 zones. So he continues this, and then now he's running between the the hole zone that was shaded towards the boundary there. And he's getting in between these 2 underneath zones where there's a lot more space to work with. And you've also got 2 lesser athletes that he's working between. These are both linebacker types, much less athletic than a corner and a linebacker underneath zone. So it's actually not not quarters, but this looks like it is a cover two. It might be, I can't see the bottom corner on the field. It might be cover six, but um, yeah. So you see him there just show a high IQ of this time I keep running my route, and in that previous play, I throttle it down because there's a lot more space between those zones. So there's so many there's so much production to be had in the NFL strictly off of this skill set. Just knowing when to stop and knowing when to continue running. He shows that you're going to see him make so many open grabs where you wonder how he got so open. This is how he got so open. He knows zones. He understands coverages. He on his release, he can read the back safeties and see what covers the defense is playing. He'll have an idea of where the zones are going to be. So when he comes out of his break, he's already got an idea of where he's going to settle down. But yeah, he's a little smaller than you'd like at receiver. He's slender frame. I don't think he offers quite as much as like a Rashard Higgins does at his size and athletic profile. Rashard Higgins, 6'4", I believe. Yeah, just over 6'4", 4.47 40-yard dash. Great 10-yard split, 215. 9.92 RAS score, which is a relative athletic score. It's a metric that basically gauges how athletic a player is. And sorry, I've been saying Rashard Higgins this whole time. I meant Jayden Higgins.
Jayden
Yeah.
Higgins from Iowa State.
Yep. So that's replace all the Rashard Higgins with Jayden Higgins. My bad.
Yeah, I think Jayden Higgins is a good prospect, and I think he has some high end traits to him, but Travis Hunter, for as fluid as he moves in and out of his routes, his ball tracking ability, his strong hands, his recognition,
Yeah.
I think he's a first-round receiver prospect, and I think he's the second best receiver in his class if he just went at receiver solely. Um, I'm a really big fan of his, and I don't know how he's going to be utilized at the next level. But I would imagine it's a split between the two. He'll get to decide what he wants to play full time. He said he wants to play both full time. I think that's just unlikely. And if he does do that, that is going to be rare. I mean, we've never seen it before at the NFL level. I think the game is too physical. But Travis Hunter, I think he is legit at both positions. I think at corner, we're looking at like an all pro. I think at receiver, I think he's a Pro Bowl level talent.
Yeah, he could be. He could be a early career over 1,000-yard receiver pretty easily, I think. And part of that value is that not to say that I think he'll bust or anything, but if he busts at one, he could be all pro at the other. Like I think he's a better corner, but if he for whatever reason ends up not holding up that corner, he could still end up being an all pro receiver or a 1,300-yard receiver. So that's an extra kind of a cherry on the top with him. Is like you get two chances with him in terms of that bust rate. Just it's always there. We don't want to address it, but any player can bust, and it's much less likely with Travis Hunter. I also like Alec Ailmanor a lot. He ran in the 4.4s. That was pretty unexpected. I thought he was going to be like a 4.55 type receiver, and running in the 4.4s. I mean he's got great ball skills, great releases. You cannot press him. He gets off press so easily. Stanford left a lot to be desired in the pass game, so he doesn't have those gaudy stats, but the tape is good. The tape is really good. Big body. I think he's like 6'2". Xavier Restrepo is another guy I'm a big fan of. He's going to come in. He's going to be ready. Pro-ready guy. The way that Restrepo weaves between zones, I think, is his superpower. He is limited to the slot. Got a couple of plays to share here too. He's limited to the slot, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. You draft him knowing what you're getting. He makes these tough grabs away from his body. He moves so well through zones. You could see him right here, settle down, run to the open space, and then make that catch away from his body. Here's that kind of weaving through zones where he's up here, up top in the slot. defense drops into his zone cover three shell, and you see him go underneath this first hook curl coverage, and then he weaves through this tiny bit of space. You can see him plant that right foot there, push up. He's trying to get up over the top behind this second hook curl zone here in the cover three coverage. And he pushes through that. Now this is a miss here by Cam Ward, but yeah, man, just the way he weaves, his route running too is pro ready. You can see him throttle down here up top, outside slot receiver there. Outside leverage, steals that from the corner with that hard plant and cut. So much separation there.
He might
All
have
over.
the best agility in the draft.
Yeah. Yeah, in the way he sets up corners, the way he sets up, lots of times it's safeties covering him when he's pushing vertical and then outbreaking corners, outs, whatever it is. I think he's a value pick. I think he's someone that you can probably. I don't think he makes it to the third round. I've seen him in some mocks going like early third. I think he's a early. I don't think he makes it past the first half of the second round just because he's so what you're getting. He's gonna be productive. I think he's got a floor of being like a 700-800 yard receiver. Yeah, it's easier to play in the slot. It's easier to generate stats in the slot. So that's something to keep in mind. But it's there's not many guys who come in that what you're getting. So anyone that needs juice at receiver early second round, I think Restrepo's a great play. I like Jack Beck. I'm not as high on Jack Beck as some people are. He's been getting a lot of hype. I don't think he's quite as fluid as some other similar profile players like Alec Ailman are. But I want to slap the Adam Thielen light comp on Jack Beck so bad, but I'm not going to do it. Like it's the two white boy receiver. Like I just hate doing that, but it's easy to see that. And then I'm rounding out my top 10. I have Jaylen Noel. No, I don't know if it's Noel
It's
or
Noel.
Noel. I've heard him called Noel. Yeah, I've heard that. And I was like, is it Noel? But yeah, so it's another slot guy, but he's got so much juice. Jaylen Noel, love him late second, early third. I think that he's also a pretty refined receiver who can come in with some solid early production.
The depth of this receiver class is underrated. I think we talk about the running backs and the tight ends a lot, but we mentioned it. Like you have Tet McMillan, Travis Hunter, Luther Burden, Abuka. Then you have Jayden Higgins. I'm sure
Yeah,
Stanford wide receiver who has a really weird,
I like
funky
him.
last name. Yes.
Yeah,
Jaylen Noel is really good. Xavier Restrepo. Like this is a pretty deep receiver class. You have Golden, Isaiah Bond, who's like a speedster. So I
Savion
think
Williams.
in the first 3 rounds, there's a lot of talent to pick from. So for me, last week, my sleeper was Savion Williams, who I'm just a fan of his athletic profile. This week is the receiver you mentioned. It's Jaylen Noel. Jaylen Noel has so much
Yeah,
explosiveness to where you're watching Jayden Higgins tape. You watch both of them at the same time. They're playing the same offense. And Jaylen Noel just has this burst and explosiveness to him that it just cannot be taught. And he just flies off the screen. He pops off the screen. So he's somebody that I'm a big fan of.
yeah. He's definitely someone who it's nice when you get those two players on the same team where you can kind of get double bang for your buck when you're watching the tape. But yeah, I mean, you're watching Jayden Higgins, Jaylen Noel's popping all over the place. I did want to dive into just a few plays here by Higgins because at his size, it's rare that you have a 6'4" receiver running that 4.47. He's got a very similar frame to Tet McMillan. Tet McMillan is like 5 pounds heavier there, but let me pull this tape up. I think that I keep wanting to say Rashard Higgins, Jayden Higgins. I don't know why I keep going to that Rashard, but yeah. So Higgins here, again, 6'4", 214. I think he has a chance to sneak into the back of the first round, even for some receiver needy teams. This is a really good receiver class. It's been overshadowed by last year's class, which was a truly generational class. We don't have like that same top three we had last year, but it's a very deep and very good class. You can get someone in this early mid-second round who would likely go in the first round of like your more standard average draft. But again, at his size, let's watch him here at the bottom. He bends this inside initially, pushes it upfield, and then the way that he settles back out. And then look at how he, right before the ball comes, he slows down. So you've got this corner playing flat technique here. So he's going to push up and then he's going to try to get depth. He's a little late getting depth, but settling down early here. This is a triangle coverage. So you've got that deep safety, you've got that linebacker underneath zone, and then you've got the flat corner. It's called a triangle coverage because it kind of forms a triangle there. And you've got Higgins settling down into that soft spot. You can see him slowing down here, anticipating that this ball is going to come. You don't want him to fade this to the sideline because now the quarterback has to put more loft on this ball and loft it over the top of this flat corner who's bailing back to try and get depth. So just you love to see that that awareness from receivers, especially at that size. Sometimes you get those really raw receivers who are like 6'4", they can run, but they just can't, they don't get the subtleties, they don't get the technical side of the game. What's his name, he was on the Chargers last year on a 1-year deal, former Clemson
DJ
guy.
Chark.
DJ Chark, great example there. He was like 6'4", ran like a 4.3, but these subtleties of the game just never came. So again, here you've got him up in the slot. So another thing with Higgins is he's movable, just like Tet McMillan is. You could have him outside, you can have him inside, equally effective. He's got that press matchup there. You can see him just throw that left shoulder into that smaller shot corner, get him on that inside shoulder where he can then just run away from that leverage. Then he uses that big frame to kind of shield that defender off. He had a great production. He had like 1,200 yards, tons of catches. Forget what the reception number was, but a very high productive receiver. Releases again. You can see that he's up at the top here. This corner in press, he throws that hand down with that. Uses his left hand there to chop down the corner's hands, and then he just steals that inside release, and that's 2 yards of separation on a quick slant. He doesn't get the ball here, but that's an easy touchdown in the NFL. Yeah, again here, more press. You can see him use that shoulder again. I love how he uses that shoulder. He dips into this inside release, and you can see him kind of lowering that shoulder to then shove into the corner here before he breaks inside. Nice little 1.5 yards of separation, creates that throwing window for the quarterback. You love to see it. I would not be surprised to see him go in the first round. I think he's got such a rare profile and a rare combination of that profile and production and some finer tendencies of like the finesse to his game. I mean, he could come in, hit the ground running year one, and I love him as a prospect.
So between him and Tet, who they have similar profiles, Jayden Higgins is more of an explosive athlete. Why don't you put Jayden Higgins over Tet?
I think that Tet brings a lot more after the catch. And I think when you combine that size and you add in that yak profile to Tet, you get a lot more explosive plays. Again, 29 forced missed tackles for Tet. That's something that adds so much value. In the NFL, explosive plays are king. If you can create those explosive plays, you are adding so much to the offense. And I think that's the primary separator between them. Higgins is the more explosive athlete, but after the catch, it's not a question for me.
A big body receiver last year went in the first round, Keon Coleman, or I think he was at the top of the second.
Yeah.
Between Keon and Jayden Higgins, who do you think is a better prospect?
Ooh. Man, that's a great comp. I think they're very. That's like what I would comp Higgins to. I've yet to think of that one. So you just put it on my mind, but that's the type of player that I think Higgins can be. I'm high on Coleman. Coleman didn't have the best contested catch rate coming out at his size. You like to see that a bit higher. I don't have Higgins off the top of my head. I'll pull that up, but yeah, I think that they're very similar. It's hard to go one way or the other.
Okay, so I think what we got at is that the receivers in this class, it's a lot of depth, and there's another position group that has a lot of depth in this class as well. That's the tight end group. But the top of the class is Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland. And I feel like there's been a lot of conflicting reports. Tyler Warren in a lot of mock drafts is the first tight end taken. But then there are reports that say that Loveland is at the top of everybody's board when it comes to tight ends. But these are two players that they play very differently. Colston Loveland is more of a route runner. He's more elusive, and Tyler Warren is just more of that natural big body tight end who can be in line and block his ass off and can also make some crazy contested catches. So between Loveland and Warren, who
Yeah.
do you think is better?
So they're very different prospects. Before I get into them real quick, I just want to tie up the end of that Coleman and Jayden Higgins contested catch rate. So Jayden Higgins last year in college, he had a 58% contested catch percentage, and Keon Coleman actually only had a 33% contested catch rate his final
And
season.
Tet was
That
at
was a
60%.
Tet was at 60%. Yeah. So
Yes.
Tet was just slightly higher than Higgins. Higgins still a healthy number. Coleman in 2022 was much better at contested catches. He had 61% contested catch rate 62% contested catch rate per PFF. So it regressed a lot there. Again, still loved him as a prospect, but that was a different factor in their profiles.
So
Back to
now
tight ends,
between,
though.
yeah, Colston Loveland, Tyler Warren, two different style of tight ends. Who do you favor and why?
Yeah, so it depends on what type of offense you have. If you're drafting Tyler Warren, you have to give him that Taysom Hill plus role. You're not going to get your value if you just stick him outside, stick him at tight end, stick him in the slot, tell him to go run 10-yard outs, 10-yard digs, stick routes, whatever you want your tight end to do. If that's the profile that you want your tight end, then you got to go to Colston Loveland. But if you're Sean Payton and if you're looking for that joker that he's talked about all offseason where you're going to have your tight end in Wildcat, you're going to have your tight end lined up at halfback and running routes out of the backfield, and get him some routes in space where he's able to catch the ball 2 yards downfield, 1 yard downfield, screens, and run after the catch, you're going to get more from Tyler Warren because that's what his profile is. He's also an elite at contested grabs. I've got a couple plays to look at from him showcasing that, but I'm sure most people have seen the highlights by now. A very high profile team Penn State was. If you're throwing it up to him downfield, he's probably going to come down with it. That's where you're getting value from him when he's running routes. Right there, sticky coverage. He's not getting separation. He kind of lumbers. He's got these heavy feet, and he runs hard in terms of he seems like he's almost got like an Isaiah Pacheco running style where he's stomping and trying to like beat the fuck out of the ground with every step he takes. But he wins at the catch point, and so you like him on those fades. You like him downfield. Here's a trick play where he's running up the seam. You've got coverage right in his face, and he's making this tough grab over the back of the DB number 8 there, where you can see it right here, where he's just reaching back right there, catching that basically off of his helmet. Very Gronk-esque, and he does make a lot of Gronk-esque plays. He's also older. I've seen some strange reports on his age where they're not. At least going into the combine, I'm not sure if this has been clarified, but they weren't sure if he was like, I think it was 23 or 24. He's been in college for a while. He dominated in his final year. There's a much smaller sample for him, but it was the highs were peaks. They were mountain peaks last season. And like right here, this is also kind of another way that he gets open where since he lacks that finesse, he'll just kind of run through people sometimes. So we've got him up here with zero matching, kind of walling him off with that inside leverage. And you can see him dip that shoulder into him and just shove him off him, generate some separation there. And he does get open like that. You'd like to see a bit smoother movements in space from him, but again, like if you're deploying him like Sean Payton would, it's not going to be an issue. You'd get he can even go out there and be like your tush push guy. And he might get 5-6 touchdowns a year off of tush pushes. He's got these thick thighs where he can just keep driving his legs. He breaks tackles in space. Yeah, and Loveland is much more of that traditional big 6'5". He's kind of like a Kyle Rudolph type archetype, but he moves better than Kyle Rudolph does. We've got Colston Loveland lined up inline tight end down here to the bottom. Um, yeah, so you can see him here against the cover three corner, opened his hips on him, but you can see how Loveland, again, 6'5" here, throttles this down and is so smooth in that bend, that outcut there, where he gets the corner to open his hips and he just flips them faster than the DB does. And he's smooth, and not every route is smooth. You'd like to see a little more consistency in his movement, but he's really young. He had great yards per route run production, early declare. You love to see it at the tight end spot. He falls in line with some of those rare tight end prospects who ended up booming early in the NFL in terms of like early declare, yards per route run, those statistics that really help shape the profiles of tight ends. Right here, you split them out wide. Same thing, fluid in space, settles down. No wasted movements. Moving back in line here. Bends this upfield, breaks it, gets that matchup on the safety, gives him that little bend like he's running the crosser before then breaking it out. And he creates so much space with some of these outcuts. That's where I really see his route running ability is on those outcuts, lined up inline or outside. Just very smooth comebacks as well. Any route where he can push up field and then flip his hips, cut out, cut down. He's very fluid at that. And I think that he's a late first round type prospect. I think Warren is mid to late first round. You get that extra value with Warren where even if Warren doesn't work out at tight end, he can settle into a very productive role as a Taysom Hill type quarterback, a Taysom Hill type tight end. I think it's team based. If you're the Broncos, you draft Tyler Warren. If you're like, I don't know, the Minnesota Vikings looking for a tight end, and you probably go with Colston Loveland, something more traditional. You have to commit more. You have to put more energy into maximizing the value of Warren, but what you'll output from that is very similar. Just what do you need?
I think that Loveland can be the primary target in a passing offense, and that's why I favor him over Tyler Warren. I don't know if Tyler Warren can quite
Yeah.
be that. I think he's probably a complementary piece. I think Loveland can be that piece. You can run your offense through him because of the route running, because of the speed that he has to offer. Tyler Warren, I'm in love with his contested catch ability, but that always worries me a little bit when we talk about the NFL and projecting, because those are tough catches and the probabilities always go down when you're talking about contested catches.
Yeah, for sure. It's a little less translatable. The skill is a skill that translates, but um, as kind of we were talking about with Keon Coleman, where he jumped down to from a 62% contested catch rate to a 33% in a year. I mean, if the contested catches don't translate for Tyler Warren, then you've basically got a guy who's pretty unplayable at receiver. You definitely don't want to split him wide. You don't want him running much of a route tree inline. So, yeah, if you're looking for a top two option in your receiving game, you go Loveland and you don't think twice.
Yeah, this tight end class is very deep. Loveland and Colston. I mean, Colston, Loveland, and Tyler Warren are at the top of it. Now, moving on to the next topic, Ashton Jeanty. I feel like now the likelihood of him being a top 10 pick is likely because of the Bears and what they did to their offensive line. Is he a generational prospect? And if he is, why are we so scared about this positional value conversation? We saw Saquon Barkley be the second overall pick in the draft. We've seen running backs go high before. If you have an infrastructure that can succeed with Jeanty, I think you pull the trigger and you take him in the top 10. We saw Atlanta take Bijan with the 8th pick. They don't regret it. So I feel like if you think that you have an infrastructure for this player to succeed, you take the best prospect.
I think that he's generational for sure. He might have the best contact balance that I've ever seen. Like it's so good. He eats contact, and so often you don't see it. It's like he wasn't even touched. Like he is not affected by it. He was number one in yards after contact per attempt, number one in missed tackles forced per attempt. He had a below average yards before contact at like 1.65, which is not very good. You can compare that to like let's see, Caleb Johnson, who had 2 yards before contact, Damian Martinez, who had 1.85 yards before contact, Travion Henderson, who had 2.57 yards before contact. Like he had almost a full less yard before contact than Travion Henderson did, and still was number one in yards after contact and number one in forced missed tackle per attempt, and number one by a mile in RBIS at 8.4. Number two is Tootin at a 6.9. So in terms of the analytic, the eye test, he's a home run. The only thing that worries me top 10 is just one, if you're drafting top 10, you're typically not ready for a running back to be that cherry on the top position. You bring up a good point with the Bears where they might be. Another thing, though, is when you draft a back top 10, he's instantly paid like a top 5 running back. We saw that with Saquon. We saw that with Bijan. The way that the rookie scale contracts are set, it slots them in really high on that pay grade. And so you're not getting that surplus value by drafting a back top 10. It's kind of like if he performs really well or even elite the way you hope he does, he's kind of paid like he's worth. Like he's already paid like a top back and now he's producing like a top back. Okay, but you're not getting surplus value on that. That's what scares me about drafting a running back really high. He is generational. He'll come in. I think he's on draft day, he's instantly a top 5 running back in the league. It wouldn't surprise me if he runs for 1,600 yards as a rookie. But I want a value on that rookie deal. And other than the Bears, I like if we see the Cowboys trading up for him, or if we see a team like that draft Ashton Genty, it's scary because they're not ready for him. They don't have the O-line to support Ashton Genty. I love the Broncos as a landing spot. I love the Bears as a landing spot. Maybe not at that pick. Maybe if they trade down first, but
I definitely understand that perspective. But I just look at if you already feel like Ashton Jets is going to be a top 5 running back, then
yeah,
the rookie scale doesn't really matter all that much. If you believe he's going to be that good, then you just draft him anyway. I think the Bears are probably the best landing spot in the top 15 picks. I think the Cowboys, we just seen them lose some of their defensive linemen. They're bringing in a ton of draft busts into their
Zach
building.
Martin retired.
Yeah, so the offensive line, I don't like that situation too much, but I do think it would be just a major talent boost on their team regardless, and it
It
would
would,
just help them out drastically, even if, Ashton Genty probably doesn't put up like generational numbers there. But you look at the recent running backs that have went high in the first round, Bijan, Jahmyr Gibbs. I don't think the Falcons or the Lions regret those picks. And I think with Ashton Genty, he might be a better prospect than both of them. And if that's the
yeah,
case, I don't think you overthink it. And the fact that the Bears overhauled their offensive line, Jonah Jackson and Joe Tooney being the only veterans on that offensive line, I think the Bears, they should 100% go with Ashton Genty with their first pick.
yeah. I mean that's valid. Yeah. It's more. I think it's you ask yourself how you view the philosophical part of like where running back should be drafted. I worry about injuries too, and how much more risky those are at the running back position and the age that they start to decline. But they also come in pro ready. They're very translatable. If they have great yak numbers, if they have great missed tackle force numbers in college, they're probably going to have that in the NFL too. It's a very strong correlation. So yeah, I mean, to each their own on that.
The top 5 running backs in this draft, Ashton Genty is pretty easy, number one. Number
Yeah.
2, is it Omarion Hampton?
Oh yeah, yeah. I think Amari and Hampton is settling into. It feels almost unanimous now as at that RB2 spot. I I was a little worried at his listed. I think I saw him at like 6'2" on some websites before. And when you're 6'2" at a running back, you start to get some kind of like Latavius Murray vibes where he was good. He was solid, but like uh, when you're that lanky and tall, there's more areas to hit. You go down easier when you're hit low. But Derrick Henry obviously has fought against that narrative, but he's also got these crazy long arms where he can shield away those low hits that come at his ankles and at his lower body that actually do take him down pretty quickly when they land. He's much more better. He's much better running laterally where you can use those arms. Still talking Derrick Henry there, but yeah, I think Hampton coming in at like 5'11" and whatever it was good. It's one of those positions where you want them to be shorter, not too short, but I like that number under 6 feet. Wildly explosive, elite RAS score. He had what was it? He was like top 5 in RBIS. He had a 4.4 yards after contact per attempt number. He had a 26 or 0.26 force missed tackles per attempt. Very, very strong. Explosive. Yeah, I'd be another Broncos potential player there. Chargers maybe. Amari and Hampton on the Chargers, man, that would be crazy with Jim Harbaugh. After Hampton, I still have Caleb Johnson as my third running back. I feel like after he ran that 4.57 40, people kind of shied away from him. We're like, oh, like I thought he was going to run faster. I was surprised it was that low, but I mean, he was number 4 in RBIS, 4.4 yards after contact, just like Amari and Hampton, 28.28 force missed tackles per attempt, zero point 0.02 higher than Hampton. He glides. He's such a good mover in space. He's got some very, very good receiving upside. Maybe not for like a full route tree, but taking swings and moving in space. The way that he flips his hips is so fluid. Big guy. 220, I believe it is. I think he's very healthily still my RB3. RB4 is where things get a little murky. I'm still with Travion Henderson, who I think is so explosive. I love how he runs. I love him in space. I love a back that can turn a 4 or 5 yard carry into a house call. Adds so much value. He can do that. And then RB5 is like, these guys are, you get a stack of like 5 guys that you could go any which direction with. I think those guys are Cam Scattaboo, even Bashul Tutin, who I'm higher on than most people. He does have some injury red flags that will get cleared up, hopefully going into the draft, but I could see him kind of fall a little bit because of those. Who else? You've got like Quinshon Judkins, who did not score that well in RBIS. He was a 4.0, which was average. Missed tackles forced per attempt were decent at 0.2. Nothing spectacular. Yards after contact were only 3. So compare that to like Genty at 5.25, or even his teammate Travion Henderson at 4.4 yards after contact in the same offense. He was getting a full 1.4 yards more after contact than Judkins was. But Judkins has an elite athletic profile. He glides in space. He's a great mover. He was better earlier in his college career than later. But I'd probably slot him there for that athletic profile. I love it. I think Damian Martinez is another guy I really, really like. He's got 300 carries per year potential. Great mover, breaks tackles, yards after contact, great feet in space. Yeah, and then when you start looking down a little more, I think like Ollie Gordon is an interesting name because he was so good 2 years ago. Oklahoma State's offense fell off a cliff last year, and his production, basically all of his analytics kind of fell off a cliff. His tape wasn't as good, but lots of times that just correlates with the froze for a second. Did I cut out there?
Yeah, you did.
Am I good? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good now.
What part was I cutting out at?
Talk about the offense.
Let me stop sharing my screen when I'm not using it. Okay. Whose offense? Oklahoma State.
Oklahoma State's, yeah, with Ollie Gordon.
Okay, I'll just redo Gordon. But yeah, when you start looking down the board a little bit, I think Ollie Gordon is another name with some intrigue. A couple years ago, he was extremely productive. And then Oklahoma State's offense kind of fell off a cliff last year. As did his production. And that's something where the RB position is so correlated with an offense. And if the line isn't as good, if the play calling isn't as good, if the scheme falls off, the running back production will likely fall off a bit too. And I think that he experienced a bit of that last year. He's one of those tall backs, but I think that if he goes to a good situation, we might see some surprising tape from him early in his NFL career.
For me, my top five is going to be Ashton Genty, Omari and Hampton at number two. Number three, Travion Henderson. Number four, I don't know why. I just kind of have a feeling I really like Cam Scatterboo. I feel like he's getting a little bit slept on in this
Yeah.
process. I think he's a great
Yeah.
receiver. He has explosiveness to him as well. I think people are scared off of him because like it's just, oh, will his speed translate? But I don't think he's a slow player. I don't watch him and think like, oh, this
Yeah.
guy's slow. He can't move. And number five, maybe it's the combined, maybe it's the 40-yard time, Bashal 210 thinking about having him at five, but Quinshon Judkins, it's hard not to have him at
Yeah.
five, even with the differences in RBIS score in the offense. Just the physical profile. He graded out as like one of the top RAS profiles
Yeah.
in the draft. So, it's very
Hard to
hard
ignore
to,
that.
yes, it is. And Bashal 210 is fantastic, but I kind of want to see a little bit more from him.
Yeah, and the injury thing with him is a little concerning. There were a number of games where he was wearing a knee brace, which might speak a little bit to the fact that he was still producing at such a high rate, a
Yeah,
0.34 missed tackles forced per attempt, 4.4 yards after contact. Tootin is so good at making the second level defender miss, and then he accelerates so quickly where he's not like I think Cam Scatterboo is going to be a good NFL running back. He's got some sneaky potential. He could be a high carry back, work bell cow back in the NFL. But when he breaks a tackle at the second level, he's getting hawked 5-10 yards later. Tootin has those jets to turn those into house calls. And it's rare that you have like a 4.32 40 time with elite yards after contact and elite missed tackles forced per attempt numbers. You don't see that very much.
you don't. And that's why he's such an intriguing prospect. But it's going to be an interesting draft, and that's going to cover the offensive players for the most part. Next week, we'll be back with defensive prospects, probably starting with defensive lineman, probably a third defensive lineman, as we'll probably clarify which position we're going to do. But that's what's going to be the show about next week. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.